Well, welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. We are happy to have you here today. My name is Patrick Hollis, and I'm an InfoPath MVP. And at Qdabra, we focus on electronic forms, and that includes the premier form, which is InfoPath. We're still talking about InfoPath, which we expect to be around for many years to come, but we are also looking at new form technologies. And if you haven't been to our formsquo.com site, you can see how we spell that up in the upper right-hand corner here. Formsquo.com is our new site where we're sharing resources with you to help you make a decision about whether you need to migrate your form data from InfoPath to something else. We've got lots of different videos and webinars up there discussing other technologies. But today we're talking about InfoPath, and specifically we're talking about some tips, some gotchas, and a how-to. So I've got here 5 things that came up. Last week we did this webinar. Actually, we did a different one last week, and we had people ask us questions like normally they do. And in the feedback, we got these kinds of questions. So we thought, well, we'll just respond to what people want. We'll just do what people want. And there were 5 areas that I focused on. We looked at how to auto-populate city-state from zip code. Many of you may not be using this technique today. It's very simple and it's very, very cool. I'll be showing that first. Then I'll be looking at, I'll be talking about repeating data. We have done many webinars in the past on how to map repeating data to a SharePoint list. Very common request. We even have a tool that allows you to map multiple repeating data's parent, child, grandchild to multiple SharePoint lists. And we've talked about it in the past. I'm going to show you an example. I'm also going to refer you to a bunch of other webinars we've recorded that show more detail because we have a limited time today. And then I'm going to jump in and talk about databases. Databases are a common gotcha with InfoPath. Querying databases is hard to do a parameterized query. What does that mean? It's hard to query just a subset of the information in a database table using a search parameter. Usually you have to pull everything down. We'll show you how to do it using a search parameter today. Does require an add-in, which we provide for free. And there's also a submit to a database without code. So if you're trying to submit to a database, you either have to have a database form already created or you can't do it. And none of these techniques work with the browser, out-of-box techniques. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll end up with how to make your form multi-language enabled. So without any further ado, I'm going to just show you the first technique here, which is, I think, the most interesting in terms of POP. It's very simple to understand. So we have a form here, and this form is our T-shirt form. And we have a customer love here. We send you a T-shirt. And I can select these buttons, and you can see I'm an X large here. So the nice thing about it is I can actually just type in my zip code and bingo, get the city where I'm at right now. So let's just for kicks, let's just type in something else like where I grew up. So you can see that it just very quickly populates the city when you type in the zip code. And this works for any of the zip codes in the United States. So let's see here. If you have the question dialog open, I'd like you to quickly type in a zip code, and we'll take the first person to type in a zip code into the question dialog there. Thank you very much. Dimus1 32806. Just to show you that this is indeed working. He's in Orlando today. Greg, where are you at? 15905. You get the idea. Let me just do this again here. Let's see where Greg's at. 15905. Greg's in Johnson, Pennsylvania. Great to have you, Greg. Jennifer, we'll do one more. Jennifer Lopez, 77511. She's in Alvin, Texas. So everyone wants this cool feature. How did we do it? We've shown this about a year ago in a webinar. Today I'm going to give you this form. I'm also going to give you an XML template part that you can use to inject in other forms. And actually, let me show you that. So we want to start a form from scratch, or take your form, for example. This is 2010. A lot of our customers are still on 2010. I've got 2013 on a separate machine here. But let's just say that you wanted to add this functionality to your form, my new form, right? And we have this XML template part that we've packaged for you, and it's called XTP zips, zip codes. Now, the way you add it is you go into your add or remove custom controls, and you have to select it. So it's a template part. So you're going to go and you're going to find it on your machine. When you get the package from us today, just go ahead and unzip it, and you can get your zip code XTP. And then once you've added it to your controls, it'll appear down here in your custom controls, and you can add it to your form just by clicking on it. Okay, so we just added to the form, and then when you preview it, we'll take the next one here. I think Shane was in 48702 and not working. Okay, so what's going wrong here? So let's just make sure that this, I did make a change to this late last night, and maybe he's, did I type it in wrong, Shane? Maybe I typed it in wrong. Let me try it again. Okay, so he's in Berkeley, Michigan. Nice to have you in Berkeley, Shane. Okay, so it is working. There is no 48702, which makes sense. So what we're doing here when we get the zip code is we're taking the zip code, and we have a rule, set city and state here on the right. And that rule is just doing what it says. It's setting the city using a filter, and it's setting the state using a filter. That filter is where the magic lies. So here we have a secondary data source. We've actually packaged up all 44,000 zip codes in the United States into a very compressed secondary data source, and it compresses down to, like, I don't know, 40K. So it's not very large at all. I'll show you that in a minute. And what we're doing is we're filtering the data. So we're setting the city equal to the city of the zip code that we selected in the secondary data source, where it's equal to the currently selected item. And this is the trick. I want to thank Jimmy Risch, our InfoPath MVP from Kyoto, who's a team member and employee at Qdabra, for this very special trick here. And the way you insert it is you just type it in using a formula. So you don't have to do this because you're going to get this from us for free. But you can you select formula, and you want to do this. If you do the zip code, so usually what people do is they'll say zip, right? Zip, where the zip code equals the zip that we have selected, right? So this is the zip code for the current item. And of course, if you do this way, then we'll see here how slow it is. It's very slow. So we'll type in, let's see, Mark 32605, 32605, 1001. Well, that's pretty fast. Let's try it again here. 73. Maybe it didn't take when I made the change. Yeah, but it's just not working right now. So because I made that change. And this is the trick: is that you want to make sure that you set the zip code, filtering it where the zip code, and this is the zip code in the secondary data source. This is why it didn't work, because I screwed up my filter. Where this is equal to, typically what people do is they select the main data source. This is where they're actually doing the work, right? This is what they typically do. That's a typical filter. Let's see what this does here, because this is the slow approach. And for those of you who have taken our class, I do cover this in our class. So let's try this again with Tom's zip code 73012. And you can see as I tab out, it's taking several seconds to display Bray, Oklahoma. Hey, nice to have you, Tom. And then John's at 44667, 1001, 1002, 1003. Okay, he's in Orville, Ohio. So you can see how slow it is if we don't do the really tricky Jimmy Risch XPath, and that is the current function that he's using, or that we're using here in this case. And the way you do that, once again, is you go into your filter, and you don't set the main data source, because otherwise it's going to search through all 44,000. Instead, you plop in this function current, which magically just keeps track of where you're at using an index. It's hard to explain, but it's in the sample. There's a few words here in the sample that show you how this works. And here, once again, we'll type in Adams 63134, and that's much faster. Okay, so that's the zip code thing, and you can take a look. What you're going to get today from us is you'll get this form, which has the T-shirt. This shows you how to do it. You can just select the zip code. You can look at the rules, see how to do it. We have a short explanation of what this is doing down below, and then you can You can also take a look at the XML template part, and you can reuse that in your solution. So you'll get this package of forms from me today. We give you the XTP zips. That's your zips. Now this only works with 2010 or 2013. So for those of you using 2007, you're out of luck today. We can actually go and convert this down to an XTP, which is a 2007. It should work just fine, but we'll need to do some extra work there to do that. So if you've got 2007, please contact us and email. But for those of you with 2010 or 2013, the XTP2 format will work just fine. And like I said, you'll go from the designer, you'll add the custom control, you'll add this guy in, and then you'll select it, and then you'll use it. And it's all self-contained. Now, if you want to look at what went into this, let's take a look at the zip code XSN. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, these InfoPath XSN files are simply zip files, they're simply CAB files. So we can actually go in and change it to a CAB file. And I think, of course, you've got to go into your options in IE, and this virtual machine doesn't have that. So what I'm going to do instead is you can rename the xsn.cab, C-A-B, and then double-click it, and it just looks like a zip. But if you don't have your folder set up correctly, you can go in and change your folder. That's easy to do. Or you can go into your publish options, and you see there's an export source files here. So I can actually go in and I can export these source files, and I'll just do it to my, let's see if I can find the right pathway here. Okay, so I've got my folder for today. I'm going to create a subfolder here, and I'll call this zip code XSN contents or something like that, zip code sample, something like that. Okay, and let's see, did it rename it for me? Yes, it did. Then you click OK, and it's going to unpackage all of those contents for your form in the zip code sample. And you can see here, if I go into extra large icons, you can see here, this is the form. This has got my images in it and so on, my colors, my logo. What you also see is you see that the zip code XML is 3.8 megabytes, but it compresses down to, well, when we compress it compresses down to, let's go back to the root directory. The total XSN size is just 300 KB. So it's not 30 KB, but it is significantly smaller than the total set of zip codes. The zip codes XML file, which contains all 44,000 zip codes, that's 3.8 megs, but it compresses down because the XSN, the CAB format, the XSN is a CAB format, and that's very highly compressed. So you can take a look at how we did this. And now to create this yourself, what you would do is you would add that XML as a secondary data source in your InfoPath form. And you can see the way to do that is to go into your resource files, and you can see here we have the zip codes XML added there. And you would just add it, and then you would go into your data connections and you would add a reference to it using the received data XML document, and then you can select the resource file that you just added right here. And that's how you add it. And then once you have it added to your form, you can see in the secondary data source that it just has this structure, zip, city, state. And that we're just using that to look up the zip code. So it's pretty simple stuff. Doesn't really impact your form. Works fine in the browser. Okay, so that's it for zip codes. Any questions? Please add your questions. Actually, let's take a quick look here. Let's see. Does current work for other cascading? This is from Stacy. Yes, it does. Current is a very powerful function. If you are looking for more love on the current function, you can go to InfoPath Dev, our forum site, and let's just go there real quick. And you can search for current. There's actually a really nice short blog post from Greg Collins on this, and you can just search our forum here, if I can do it right, for current. And this is a very popular topic, so you will find lots of blog posts on this, and including one by Greg here from 2005, where he shows you how to do this for cascading lists. So just searching for current is going to be in your top list of 10 solutions there, Stacy. And you can also look for other, there's a couple other nice blog posts that Greg does. I think he talks about the axis or the axes. And here's another one, for example, where he talks about current. So lots of different current posts, and current is a very powerful XPath. Another question from Michael. Okay, you're just saying you've already done this. Okay, great. You've already added that. Wonderful. Glad to hear that. Okay, so next up. So once again, the benefit is it's super fast and no code required. So the next most commonly requested question is regarding mapping repeating data. Now with repeating data, you're typically looking at a form that has several different, well, let's just take a look at an example. We've got a demo order form here, and this order form has a repeating section here for order items. Now there's several ways to do this. Actually, there's two main ways. There's an approach called CAML, which stands for Collaborative Application Markup Language, and this is SharePoint's HTML language for rendering these views in SharePoint. So you can use CAML to map the data to your list, and we've talked about this in the past, and if we go back to our webinars, you can see that we talked about this many times in the past, including last summer. Let's see here. There anywhere where it says repeating, obviously. There's an example where we do workflows that handle repeating data on 10.3. The February 28th webinar from last year is showing you how to display repeating data in a SharePoint library. So that will be your ticket right there to take a look at if you want to look at the CAML approach. And we have lots of labs on this, so we can send you a lab as well to show you how to do this. But the second approach is what I want to talk about today, because the CAML approach is a bit limited. Number one, it's messy, and you have to create these XMLs that are hard to use. Number two, it doesn't work with lots of structures. If you've got a parent-child repeating data, it doesn't work very well. It actually doesn't work at all. You can work with one table or multiple tables, but it's more difficult. And so the technique that I'm going to show today is using QRules. And really, all I'm going to show, because we're running out of time here and I want to talk about these other things, is I just want to show you how I did it. So we have a submit button in the form, and the submit button has, the form actually has a mapping file that we added. So we have a tool in QRules, which is our plugin for InfoPath, and the tool allows you to create a mapping file, and then you add this to your resources once again as a data connection, XML data connection, and then when you submit the data, you're going to call that a rule in QRules, and the rule is called, in this case, it is called submit SharePoint list, and then you specify that mapping file along with the list that you want to map to, and that corresponds to your data connection in your form. So here we have that data connection for the SharePoint list right there, and that's just pointing at our list.asmx web service. So SharePoint comes with a web service that will allow you to do this. QRules is using that when it maps the data. And then if we take a look at the library, let's just refresh this. So we have some examples in here. For example, we filled out a form, and let's just pick one of June's examples here. This is the first time SharePoint hasn't had its coffee this morning, so we're hitting the server, the browser, InfoPath Form Services, for the first time in a couple hours, and so it went to sleep on us. So give it a second, and we'll see the form here. So my tester June put in a whole bunch of very uninteresting data here. I will have to talk to him about his creativity. But you can see that we've added some data, and we're mapping it to this library here. It's list, actually. So it simply maps the data to the list on submit using that QRules function. Okay, so that's, I know people want to see more, but unfortunately I'm going to move on. So if you have questions on that, please don't hesitate to bug me further. We've done this a lot. This is the most commonly requested gap in InfoPath and SharePoint today. So there's several solutions here, 2 solutions, and we can show you both. You don't need QRules, but QRules makes it easy. Okay, so let's talk about the third thing I want to talk about is databases. There's two things we typically want to do with databases. Number one, we want to query them to get data. So I'm going to switch to my other machine and show you a database, and make me a presenter here. And I have a database, hopefully you can see my screen. So I have a database here with two tables. I've got a table with my expense reports, and these are the purposes, Happy Time, Happy Hour, our get-togethers with K2 and Microsoft, and some training for an important partner of ours. Now we also have the items underneath them. So each of these reports matches to these items. And if we go up to our SharePoint site, I can show you these reports here. I'll just create a new one here because we want to show this is live. So once again, firing up, well, it should be faster than it was before. So we've got a purpose here is going to be weekly webinar, and we're going to add some information here. Make sure my manager's name is in here. Just be myself for now. So today is the 12th, and we're going to get some coffee. Zoka's Coffee is my favorite coffee roaster in Seattle, and we'll call it a meal for now. $2.45. It's an expensive cup of coffee. We're not talking McDonald's variety here, but we do like McDonald's because McDonald's has great cheeseburgers. So next up, we're going to go to McDonald's and for the Happy Meal without the $1 coffee, which is pretty good actually, but the Happy Meal is probably less than the coffee at Zoka's. Okay, so there's our expense report. We'll submit this. Once again, this is just browser form, stock 2007 expense report form, no problem. Submit it and it disappears. Well, that's because we have a mapping set up to show this form in a different library. I'm not going to go into detail about what I just did there, but we can map to multiple libraries using this web service. I'm going to show you. So I'll just make one change here to call this 222, just so you know that it is updating. And we'll switch back to our database and show you that item here. I'll just go refresh this list. And you can see there are my two items mapped to my database. So the form submits the data to the database, and it's arbitrarily recursive deep mapping. So we'll just, there's my weekly webinar. Now what I want to show though is I want to show how to query that information. So I'm going to switch to my other computer, switch back. And there we go. And we're going to switch back and show the example form I have. And this form is going to query that data. So quickly show that we're just going to list all the expense reports here, including the weekly webinar. And then we're going to get specifically those items underneath it. So it's very easy to do this using this web service. And the way we do this, I create a data connection. And the data connection just points to the web service. We specify an XML query string. And this is the real power, is these query strings can be programmatically determined. So you can change them on the fly, which is what we're doing here in this second example. So when we select an expense report, we have a rule that fires. And that rule, what it does is it sets the query value for the second data connection, which is expense report items, and it's setting the query XML equal to this formula. And simply what we're doing is we're taking that XML, we're concatenating the value of the report ID that was selected. In other words, the report that we want to see the items for. And then it goes off and it queries the data connection. That's the second action here. And that gives you the ability to parameterize your queries. Now you will need to install our web service for this. We have a free trial on our site. And it's very, very cheap, inexpensive, and we love to support people who use it. So just showing you once again where you get that from, you go to Qdabra.com, click on Web Services, DB Excel Services, and you click on Free Trial, and there you go. We have a lot of customers using it. In fact, a number of you in the call today are probably using it. And the benefit here is that when you deal with browser-based forms, you cannot connect directly to a database because there's no forwarding of the credentials in the browser. So you have to use some kind of a web service. The problem is that Microsoft doesn't give you the SQL web service. So that's where we come in. We give you that web service, and instead of creating separate web services for every single InfoPath form template you have, which creates a management nightmare in terms of migration or maintaining those web services, we give you one. It's generic. It allows you to query all your databases, all your SQL servers, and submit to those SQL servers. And we have admin tool and QueryDB tool that you'll use to create the queries. Let me just quickly show you the query tool here. This is not it. So we have a tool that you install. It's actually an InfoPath form. So it's an installed form, and you can use it to create queries. Here's what it looks like. This is a little bit of an older version, but you type in where the web service lives, and then you can create your queries. You can build the queries. It'll give you those XML strings. So you don't have to actually create them yourself. So there's a nice tool, and we have lots of people using that, and it's fairly easy to use. Okay, so that's it for the database stuff. So I talked about submitting to a database. Once again, this is a very good solution. We talked about querying. Now submitting to a database, what you're going to do is just use the same web service and you just submit to it, and then you're going to map it. Now let me show you how we map to the database. So I didn't show you that, but I'll just quickly do this because I'm running out of time. Okay, so once again, switching to my other machine, we have a tool that runs and it allows you to map your form to the database. Once you install the web service, it comes with this GUI tool, this admin tool, which is, once again, InfoPath form. And this shows you the database on the left and the form on the right. So it's just mapping from your forms data to the actual database tables. In this case, we have a couple parent tables. We also have a child table here for employees, and we have another child table down below for report items. So I just showed two tables, but you can see here that we're actually mapping the data on the right to the column in the database table on the left. So it's a very easy tool. It allows you to change your mapping on the fly. You can remap your forms in a batch way. You don't have to resubmit them. So it's a very powerful way to map your XML data into a database. And I'm going to switch back and finish out my presentation. I have one more interesting demo to show you, and then we'll take questions. And next week we're going to do this again. So if you have other things you want to know about, I can do demos next week if I don't have time today. So the last tip I want to talk about is multi-language labels. This came up actually for a project we're doing. Again, it's a common theme. People want to have a form that has multiple languages in it. So I'm going to show you a form that does not look like the expense report in the design mode, but if I preview this, you'll see that this is indeed the expense report. But this expense report actually has multiple language support on it. And I've shown this in my training class before, so some of you may have seen this. But we're using one view to do this. And it's all one view, and we're able to change not only the labels, but also the values for the drop-downs, the labels on the buttons. We cannot change the date picker. That's still going to show us English. You cannot override that. But you can override pretty much everything else. You can't override this add expense here either, although what you could do is you could just remove it and have a button that adds it, and the button could be localized. So how do we do this? It's very easy to do this. In the designer, you can see that we've converted all of those labels to be calculated values. And if we look at the calculated value properties, what we're doing is we're essentially looking up the form title from a secondary data source where we have all the strings, where the language is equal to the currently selected language. So it's just using another filter, using another XML data source to do that. Now the nice thing about using these secondary XML data sources is that you can modify them, and guess how you do that? You just use InfoPath. Because InfoPath is your XML editor of choice, you can just create another design form that allows you to change these titles. Let's just change this to June 12th expense report for webinar. This is the new title. It's pretty long. I don't really know if I want to use that long of a title that might wrap, but let's try it. So we're just going to save that XML out, and we'll just save it out as my labels here. And then to add it to your form, you do have to go back in and re-add it. So let me show you how I did that. So here's the form again. In the Data Connections tab, we have the expense report localization XML, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add it again by browsing to my library, and there it is. And I'm just going to add it again and preview, and you'll see now that we have the new title. Right. So it's data driven, and now, obviously you may want to look up those labels dynamically from a SharePoint site if you have online connectivity, which most of you will have these days. So you don't necessarily need to bake it into the form template, but that's how you would if you want to go offline, for example, or use it like zip codes without having to query any data connection online. Okay, so that's it for my last quick demo. About ready to take questions, and that's what this is all about. So questions for me. Looks like we have some questions. Okay, so yes, Tom, I typed in your zip code wrong. Or actually, the first, I had a bug there, and I fixed it, so hopefully that's good. Let's see. I think I answered, Stacey, your question about current. Greg, you're asking whether this works in the browser. We could publish it out and test it, but filtering cascading drop-downs is a little bit tricky with 2007, I believe, but 2010 it should work just fine. We could publish the zip codes form out there and try it. Let me do that at the end here. I'm going to do that just to verify it, but I'm pretty darn sure it works just fine in the browser. Current function works fine in the browser. I'm 95.7% confident that the zip code sample will work fine in the browser. Michael's got a question. Oh, nope, you're just making that comment again about the zip codes being a nice feature. Cool. And Tom, thanks for the love there with the DBXL Rocks comment. I really appreciate that. Gus, does DBXL work with other than MS SQL databases? It works with SQL, and then you can use SQL Services Integration Services, SQL Server Integration Services to map it to Oracle or some other thing. And we've done that for a number of customers. But to answer your question specifically, it doesn't directly work with Oracle. As long as it's a SQL database, it'll work just fine. But you'd use SSIS to map it to a separate Oracle database. So that's it for today. I want to remind you once again that we do have everything available on YouTube. It'll take about 3 or 4 hours for us to upload this video, but it should be out by noon. We also have our formsquo.com site where we're going to be updating this in June. We actually have a couple new free, absolutely free, we'll never charge you for these applications out there. We have a free replacement for browser InfoPath called Forms Viewer. The goal here is to give you a migration path forward. If, for whatever reason, InfoPath stops working in the cloud, we've got an app that you can install with 365 that will continue to display and edit your InfoPath template forms. And it also has extra functionality, so we've baked in some Q rules. And once again, just go to this site here if you want to take a look. Like I said, we're going to be updating this in the near future, so don't necessarily go there today, but in a week or two we'll remind you again of these of this. And we've gone out, we've actually talked about the different technologies, and you can see here that we have this free download app that you can use, and this will work with SharePoint Foundation along with SharePoint On-Prem, but the target is 365. So if you've got any questions on that, please don't hesitate to contact us. It's been my pleasure to have you here in this training today, this webinar. It's not training. It's a weekly webinar. It's free. I'll do it again next week. If you have time to fill out that survey, we'll send you the package of what we demoed. And, of course, if you have any questions whatsoever, you can always email webinars@qdabra.com, and